What are your interests?
My interests? Well, I like what I do for work, which is because it's always different. So I'm interested in technology and I like to learn about it. And then I like to see how it's applied. And I do a lot of work with inventors or startups or companies that are looking for new things. So that's always very exciting. I mean, of course, on the side, I like to read science fiction. That's one of my passions. I like to write lately. I've been doing a lot of writing and posting and blogging and putting out articles. Something I've thought about a lot, but I haven't done much of recently. I did a lot of it when I was younger. I like going hiking. I've always enjoyed that. I was a Boy Scout, so I always liked camping. It's not something that you or your mother really wanted to do, but I did quite a bit of that with your brothers, and I enjoy that. It's just such a different situation than I'm in on a normal basis. I like going to movies, like what I read. I like science fiction movies a lot. Um, and that's it. I like to talk to my friends and converse. I like a good conversation on almost any sort of subject. Doesn't really have to be anything in particular. We can go from one topic to the next. So if there's an interesting conversationalist, then I really enjoy having a good conversation. My oldest brother Stephen is a very good conversationalist, so it goes around. And some of my friends, like my late friend Ken, who we called Uncle Ken to you, he was a really good conversationalist, so we could just talk, moving from one subject to the other. I like to cook. Cooking is like therapy for me. Um, the nice thing about cooking is it has a beginning and an end. You know, you serve the food to everybody, and hopefully they like it, and then they eat it, and then you can clean up after it, and it's all completed. And usually when I'm working, it's never really done because by the time we get one thing done, we have to be thinking about the next thing. When you're making products, as I do for consumer technology, the technology keeps getting better, and so you have to keep thinking about, okay, we're making this thing, but what are we going to do in a year or two, and what are we going to do after that? What are we going to do after that? So it never really ends. Whereas cooking, it's complete. Hopefully everybody really likes it and it's done. But even if they don't like it, it's done. And so that can be very good as therapy. And I like to do that and break up my day that way. So those are most of the things I'm interested in.
What's your favorite book?
I really like books by William Gibson lately. I think he's a very good writer, and he's been pretty prophetic in some ways, particularly considering our current situation. I also like writer Ian Banks, who I think is a very creative writer who's written both regular fiction as well as science fiction, if you will. Those are maybe my two favorite science fiction writers. I enjoyed all the classics very much. I liked reading Dickens and those books as well very much. Mark Twain and others are really great literature. And some of the books are a little bit hard to get through, but still really great literature. So I enjoyed the classics, and from time to time I go back and read them again. So the really good use of the language is really admirable. Some of the science fiction I read, I may like it, but it isn't necessarily very well written. It's just more about the ideas that are in it. Um, writers like Ursula Le Guin, I think, was really good and very influential. She was one of the first sort of well-recognized women science fiction writers. I think that's good. I always enjoyed the writings of Jack Vance, who's really a pulp writer, but he really had a really wild imagination, and he came up with a lot of inventive worlds and things and situations which were really very good. So I enjoyed that very much as well.
What's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie? I guess it would depend on the genre, which are my favorite movies, if you will. Um, in terms of just a really great movie, I really liked Lawrence of Arabia. I thought it was a very well constructed movie. I liked that. I just watched that again. A really good one. I like a lot of the Humphrey Bogart movies. Most people don't want to watch them now. They're all in black and white, but because of the way they were shot, the actors had to create the situation. They couldn't just fly to some location and use the fabulous background. It was just a shot scene. So they had to convince you they were in Casablanca, and they had to do it by their acting. And so I enjoyed those movies very much. I like old Betty Davis movies. I think she was a terrific actress. Of course, I like science fiction and genre movies. Um, I'm looking forward to the new Dune movie. I actually liked the original David Lynch Dune movie, even though it's really messed up. He never really got to complete it, but that of which he did, I thought was really very intriguing and very well done. I like a lot of, pulpy, crummy movies. I enjoy the Blade movies and stuff like that, even though they're sort of mindless entertainment. Still, they can be a lot of fun. So I've enjoyed those. There's so much content now. It's hard to judge, and a lot of it is fun, but it isn't necessarily very good. So there it is. Of course, I liked a lot of Disney movies growing up. I think a lot of the animation movies were really touching.
Like which
I,
ones?
well, I grew up with Snow White and Fantasia, and I think all of them, and now the Pixar movies are all really beautifully put together. They're great, and they push your emotional buttons, but they're just incredibly well constructed movies. All the Toy Story movies are great fun. I really enjoyed going with you and my grandsons for their first movie, and that was a lot of fun, and yet the movie was very, very good. So I like a lot of animation, a lot of Japanese animation, anime as they call it, or based on manga. So I think that's good. I've enjoyed the Ghost in the Shell stuff much better than the movie they made with Scarlett Johansson. Um, and I think those are really good. I love Japanese monster movies. I'm a big Godzilla fan. Um, for years, I had a lot of Godzilla regalia, if you will, and my coworkers bought me a Godzilla with a neon fire tube so he could have his hot breath, and the Big G. All those movies, are great. They got progressively worse and worse. The first one was genuinely frightening, and then all the rest of them until Godzilla became the children's friend and the defender of the earth. But, still, I love the Big G. And all of those monster movies, and now they're remaking them here in the United States on a good and bad side. The first remake lately was good. The one Godzilla King of the Monsters was, in my bad, pretty bad, but compared to what? Compared to a really bad, the original Destroy All Monsters with Godzilla was also really bad. So bad it's good. I don't think that this one was made much better, but it wasn't near as funny as the original one. I like some really bad B movies. I have a book called The Psychotronic History of Movies, and in it, there's a director, Ed Wood, and I love all of his movies. I love his movies because they're terrible. They're so bad that they're hilarious. This guy has probably made some of the worst movies ever, like Robot Monster and Cat Women of the Moon and Missile to the Moon, and of course the infamous Plan 9 from Outer Space. In Plan 9 from Outer Space was Bela Lugosi, the original Dracula. Excuse me. It was his last movie, and he died while making it. In order to complete the movie, Ed Wood hired his dentist, who was over a foot taller than Bela Lugosi, so he had to bend down to sort of look like it. He didn't look anything like him. He had a spaceship in it, which was a hubcap suspended from a fishing line, and you could see that it was a hubcap suspended from a fishing line. So it was really funny, just like Cat Women of the Moon. And in Robot Monster, which is really great, he decided that the Robot Monster character all of his lines were written in iambic pentameter, a form of a poetic form. So it was really hilarious. But on top of it, as Ed Wood wrote, he wanted it to actually be a robot, but he couldn't afford to get a real robot costume made, no matter how cheaply. So he hired a friend of his who had a gorilla suit. And so the actor playing the robot monster was in his gorilla suit with big rubber boots, rubber gloves, and a toy plastic diving helmet with an antenna, TV antenna taped to the back. Now, I just ask you, it's unbelievably ridiculous. And the entire movie is rip-roaringly funny, even though it wasn't meant to be. So, those movies are really fun to watch with a bunch of friends because they're really hilarious.